We are going to go live here in just a moment. Bear with me for a second here while I just activate my Instagram and then we'll get started. Just while I'm waiting for that to happen, I think today we're going to chat a little bit about the interplay between hormones and also mitochondria and anti-aging today. So that's what we're going to be. Okay, there we go. It looks like we're in business. Everything is working. I can take my glasses off because I'm a middle-aged woman and I can't see anything these days without them close up. So let's get started. So thank you so much for joining us over your lunch hour. My name is Amber Bocknek. I'm a physician with a focused practice in anti-aging and wellness, basically anti-aging from the inside out. And a lot of our more recent podcasts have been focusing on the role of hormones and also on just general anti-aging and health principles. So before we get started and really get into the nitty-gritty today, I just need to make sure that everybody really understands that this is not intended at all to be personal medical advice. This is coming at you as just good old-fashioned educational points that you should be aware of. What I really want to do is encourage awareness around how to be healthy and how to give the future you the best health ever, but also to give you some tools to go back to your own primary care doctor or your nurse practitioner, whoever you see for your healthcare and who knows you the best, and have a real good talk with them with your own personal health context in mind. What can you do to be healthy? So some of the recommendations here we have may or may not be relevant to you, again, depending on what your other underlying health issues are. So please enjoy this as it's intended to be, which is a dialogue, a conversation, an educational piece to help you advocate for yourself. So with that said, let's dive on in. Today, I had a whole different topic that I wanted to chat about in mind, and we'll save it for another day, but I was actually on my way to work. Sometimes I listen to other people's podcasts, and I really like to follow the podcast series done by the Dutch test people or Precision Analytical. So again, if you enjoy health podcasts, here's another one you might want to consider listening to, because the evidence is good that they share, very based on scientific fact, and they have some really interesting speakers. So we see a lot of women in our office, but today, interestingly, they had a feature on hormones and testosterone and men, which evolved into a whole conversation just in general about cancer prevention. So off the top of my head here, and these are live, I don't have any notes here with me, I'm just winging it. So forgive me, I don't recall the name of the naturopathic oncologist, but they had an oncologist on who looks at complementary therapy to go along with their care. And he does a lot of work in oncology in general, but a lot for men. And they were talking about some of these, what we consider classically to be hormone sensitive cancers or cancers of reproductive organs, where we look at hormone levels. And then from there, he took the conversation into just some of the fundamentals as to why this happens, which is actually more broadly applicable. So I found it really interesting. And one of the things, just again to highlight, and I loved how he put it, there used to be almost a barrier or a controversy between using conventional medical therapy. Like, I'm a medical doctor by training, so I would classify myself as conventional or Western, and alternative, which I think these days should be thought of more as complementary. When it's done in the proper form, it's a complement and not an alternative to conventional therapy. And I loved how this conventionally trained naturopath focusing on oncology really phrased it. The way that he described his college, again, and I'm paraphrasing what I understood from his podcast, was that he, as a naturopath or trained naturopath who did extra training in oncology, views his role as not being an alternative to conventional things that I was trained in, chemotherapy, radiation, and other oncology practices of conventional or Western medicine, but rather as something that could be done alongside. So he was talking about current thought on the naturopathic side to be putting the body into optimal health in order to be able to undergo chemotherapeutic processes better, to recover better, to allow healthy cells to be able to take the brunt of our chemotherapy that conventional medicine provides and recover more quickly. And hopefully also at the same time to be able to create an environment using lifestyle, supplements, diet, etc., to make the cancer cells more vulnerable. So increase susceptibility in the cancer cells to be more treatable, ideally in the perfect world, maybe with lower doses or less aggressive regimens, and also at the same time supporting the rest of the body in coping with some of these things that we put people through in order to try to eliminate their cancer. So I really liked that teamwork approach. And he was saying in his area, I think if I remember, he practiced in Texas, but he works alongside some of the other more traditional oncologists to try to create this best environment. And again, he says when somebody gets a diagnosis of cancer, they want the best of everything. And so this was really how he was talking about it being more integrative or allied complementary medicine, not alternative. So I like that approach because again, I'm classically trained on the conventional side. So this is a teammate, not an adversary. So I really like the principles of what he had to say. To me, it's what I call medical cherry picking. Why not take the best of everything that we have and offer that up to our patients? So I really loved that approach. So that's where he started. But then from there, the part that I like was where he got into the fundamentals of why some of these different things work and what's happening just in aging in general and what we understand to be happening in some kinds of cancer processes. And my background before medical school was in biochemistry and biophysics, so I've always kind of been a little bit of a science nerd. So I like this stuff, I geek out on it. But again, you don't need to have done an undergraduate degree in science to kind of get where he's going. So let's back you up a little bit. Let's go back and just take this to sort of like a high school science level, grade 10 science maybe, when you were studying cell biology. I know for many of us, if you're in my demographic, that was a long, long time ago. So let me just walk you through a little bit. So cells have little tiny mini organs in them called organelles, mini organs. And so they all do little different jobs in the cell to keep the cell functioning. So the cell needs to be able to create energy, the cell needs to be able to divide, the cell needs to be able to make proteins in the right order and in the right way, and all of this needs to be coordinated. So one of the really vital organelles or mini organs of the cell, I've spoken about them before, and I'm becoming almost more and more interested in these mitochondria. It's so funny. I was at my gym. I'm digressing here for a second. I was at my gym the other day after we did our Thrive Summit. And so part of my anti-aging educational piece was around other roles of the mitochondria. And so I was kind of like joking and playing with everybody who was there, torturing them with science. And we were talking about mitochondria. So when I go to the gym, it's 9-round kickboxing. So you have a fighter name. So they changed my fighter name to mitochondria. So for a couple of days, every time I would go in there and look up at the pulse board, it's connected to a pulse monitor. So you can see how hard you're working out or not, and getting called out on it. I was mitochondria for a couple of days. So anyways, back to my story. The mitochondria they are important in a lot of functions in aging. So the mitochondria are like the metabolic center of your cell. So this is where you convert fuel sources into usable energy that a cell can actually use, where it takes the ingested sugars, fats, proteins that we have, and there are different mechanisms to convert that into cell energy or ATP. Remember ATP? That's a way back playback. You don't have to remember it. Anyways, it's usable energy. So this is complicated, and these little mitochondria are the key bringers of life that way. Without them, we die. So mitochondria, they only have a certain lifespan as the cell does, and mitochondria regulate themselves, as does the cell, to delete itself and break down and be replaced by a new one over time once it is noted that it has damage and it's not working properly anymore. So in the healthy state, this is happening all the time in all the cells of our body. They're constantly being created. Our cells are dividing. We got a fresh little healthy little cell. It does its work for a while. At some point, again, just the rigors, and these are all chemical reactions, so they do get damaged, and the DNA in them, in the cell, gets damaged. And so it gets recognized. We have little processes in our body to recognize when this damage happens, and we have some systems to try to repair it. And then ultimately, if it's beyond repair, we have systems to destroy that cell and then recycle those components to be reused in a new fresh cell. So that is healthy tissue turnover. That is healthy aging. When we get into other scenarios, though, as we become less healthy, and that can be through a whole host of different reasons. So sometimes we can become less healthy because of our environmental exposure. So air pollution, smog, pesticides, microplastics, those things can cause damage right down to the mitochondrial level. Other ingested toxins, lead, arsenic, some of the other things that end up in our food chain, in our water, again, can become damaging and cause trouble with our mitochondria as well as other functions. So there's these pollutants and things that can do it. Internally, stress, prolonged high cortisol. Again, under periods of extreme stress, we don't regulate our body as much. And again, sometimes processes that were designed to help us can actually be harmful. So cortisol is the main ongoing stress hormone, the longer one that lingers. There are sort of fight or flight hormones like adrenaline and norepinephrine, but that's not the ones we're referring to here. Cortisol was really meant, and this is ancestral. So this is how we would be able to mount a good stress response to flee a predator when we were being chased by saber-toothed tiger. It was meant to be there for a while to boost our blood pressure, blood sugar, heart pumping faster, sharpening our vision and our hearing so that, again, we could flee and we could survive and reproduce and make little baby humans. But over in modern times now, we have this high level of stress much more constantly. And so something that was meant to only be episodic and was in balance episodically, when we're exposed to it chronically, is actually, again, also contributing to our health. And then there are things like our sedentary lifestyle. So lifestyle also can affect how our mitochondria function. In order to keep them upregulated and efficient, a little bit of regular exercise really helps to promote mitochondrial health. So again, we've become so much more sedentary. We commute, we have long hours at a desk. We're not like what we were before. So, and you have to think, it's not that I'm saying how we lived before is better than how we live now in any sort of philosophical or esoteric stance. But you have to understand where we came from. So as a species, we are hardwired. I'm talking species level and evolutionary stuff here. We selected to survive through millennia of stressors by having coping mechanisms and adaptive systems in ourselves that made us more bioable to outsurvive other competing species and other predators. And so we've passed down that coding because we've successfully survived generation to generation, and it's in us today. So even though in the last 200 years in particular, life has changed drastically with mechanization and computers and all these other things, our DNA hasn't. So we still carry these old systems. And so we didn't evolve to live like this. So that is, again, contributing to health. So you have to always look at everything in its context and where we came from. So what are some of these major players? Pollution, toxins, environmental factors, stress, big part of it, again, internally. Lack of exercise, another factor, and just nutritionally. Again, because our lives are so busy, I guess this is kind of one of those lifestyle things that overlaps into the world of nutrition. But again, on this fast-paced life, you grab and go. You're getting fast-made processed food that doesn't have a lot of nutrient in it. And again, we're not giving our body all the cofactors that it needs for enzymatic function. Because remember, we are a big bag of walking, talking chemical reactions. And so with that, we fundamentally have to make sure we have all those things there. So diet affects us as well. So long-winded way to come around to where we're at here with their cancer discussion and their aging discussion. So what they did at the end of this podcast, which I really thought was interesting, is tying all these mitochondrial stressors into loss of regulation and control of these cells. So when the cell, which is sort of worn out and damaged, is supposed to kind of commit what we would call, I guess, cell suicide or autophagy, be destroyed and reabsorbed, apoptosis. These are some of the scientific terms, but basically the cell is supposed to self-destruct if it's damaged beyond repair. Sometimes it loses that self-destruct mechanism, and that's a problem, because then this highly dysfunctional cell that is no longer controlled and no longer doing what it's supposed to do sometimes starts rapidly dividing. This is what cancer is in many cases. This is how we look at it. It's a cell that divides without control. And so again, we need to try to optimize our health in general to keep our mitochondrial function at optimal so that we lessen the chance of having cancerous changes. Now, I don't know if this is scary or helpful to know, but in our body all the time, with all these millions and millions of cells we have that are constantly dividing, frequently there are little errors in genetic coding. Frequently there are mutations and issues, and our body is constantly recognizing these mutated cells and going in and killing them so that they don't have an opportunity to replicate themselves like crazy and turn into a tumor. And again, this is where the immune system is so important. This is where immune system meets biochemistry. And this is where stress and lifestyle plays a role. Because again, when we're perpetually stressed, our cortisol, which is our fight or flight hormone, again, if you think why it developed, which is to support us in ancestral times when we were trying to flee predators and survive, when we're chronically stressed, the dark side of cortisol, the dark side, yeah, it's live. Cortisol, the dark side, is that it is a bit of it suppresses our immune system to a degree when it's out of balance and very high levels. So this is where sometimes our body loses a little bit of its surveillance because it's so focused on survival. It's not as aware and surveilling some of these cells that are dividing out of turn, and we see higher incidences of cancer. So anecdotally, if you know people who went through this huge period of stress and then got either very sick or developed an autoimmune condition or developed cancer, it's not causality, but there's a relationship with some of these environmental factors on us. And that's another key point. Cancer doesn't generally happen because of one thing. It's not caused most of the time by X or by Y. It's caused by a multitude of things, more like a perfect storm. So a combination of lifestyle factors, genetic factors, diet, exercise or lack thereof, stress, all of these things come to roost. So to live our best life, I know it seems a little bit overwhelming, but it's getting back to some first principles. You really want to sit down with yourself when you have a little bit of headspace and say, okay, what do I need to do to live a more balanced life? Work-life balance, exercise, diet, nutrition, because all of these things really do play a role together and intertwine for overall health. From an aging point of view, again, we see accelerated aging when our mitochondria are not functioning as well. We have more fatigue. We take longer to heal and to recover. So mitochondrial health is whole body health. Keep those mitochondria happy and healthy. You have to really take care of the whole organism, the whole person. And that goes right from the top on down. So from the top, I mean the brain. That means good brain health and good management of stress and lifestyle, sleep, exercise, good nutrition, some careful supplementation where necessary, particularly if you have deficits in what you are able to get in from your diet or health conditions where you don't absorb things well, or even certain medications that are known to deplete specific vitamins. Sometimes you need to supplement a little bit to get your body optimal. But we have to nourish it. We need to support it with sleep and stress reduction. We need to exercise it. And when we do all of those things together, we create a happy, healthy environment inside our body, which helps us live longer and live healthier. At the end of the day, it really is about not just lifespan, but health span. We want to live as long as we can, but as healthily as we can for quality. So those were the take-home messages that I got today when I was listening to it. So I thought it was a really interesting podcast. So again, if you're joining in a little later, I'm referring or kind of speaking to and summarizing a bit of what I heard today on my way into work. It's called the Dutch podcast from the Dutch test. We do the Dutch test here as part of our hormone program. So this is why I follow them. They have a lot of really key vital information that I find very evidence-based and useful. So I like to listen to their podcast, but this was their feature today, which was again, this naturopath in oncology who works alongside conventional oncologists, first talking about particularly hormones and prostate cancer, then kind of got into just some of the mechanisms of general cancer development and therefore ways we can try to prevent it or manage it better and help people we know who have it, and then right into full longevity. So it was a fascinating little chat that they had. So I found it very informative and helpful. So I thought it was worth sharing. So anyways, that is our lunchtime conversation for today. So thank you to all of you who were able to join us over your lunch. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would encourage you to follow us. And I have, for more information, this is our website. If you just have a little look there at the QR code, you're able to scan that. That will bring you into our main website, which has lots of information about some of the different hormone and longevity programs that we have, as well as the other things we do. And then lastly, if you like our podcast, we'll be doing these predominantly on Wednesdays. My target time, and I call it my target time, will be to try to be online between about 12:15 until close to around 12:40, 12:45 over the lunch hour. That's a little plus minus on the start time. I try to be on time for my appointments here. And that means, again, if I'm doing well, I will be on time onto the podcast. If I'm a few minutes late, I do intend to be on there. I apologize if I'm late. Sometimes I just run a little long when I'm chatting with folks here in the office because I like to do that. So again, thank you for your time and attention. And if any of this was of interest to you, please feel welcome to comment below or message me. And again, maybe ask some of your questions of your family doctor. I want you to seek out the best information for the best care for you. We only get one life, so hey, let's make the most of it. So thanks again for watching, and until next time.